Hi. What I'm going to do is record this really good little series. Just a part of it, though. Maybe about 10 minutes of it. It's where Christopher Hitchens, is debating Tariq Ramadan. And I don't know about you, but Hitchens really kicks upraised Patootie and Prostration really well here. And but the thing is, I'm experimenting here. What I want to do is try to record the words with the closed captioning going and see how well they match with what he's saying. And if they don't match, I'm going to try to stop it and say what he says and see if when it's played back and I close caption it, my video of Hitchens, see if it matches what the computer has it as. You know what I mean? I don't know about you, but on all my videos, when it's closed captioned, it makes me sound absolutely insane. But Hitchens, I don't know if it's because he articulates well or what, but he comes off. I mean, you can hear. You can see. I mean, if a deaf person wanted to see what Hitchens was saying, they'd get an idea, you know. Whereas they try to see me in closed captioning form, I come off like a lunatic, you know. So I'm going to experiment here and record his words, and then I'm going to play it back on my computer when I download it into YouTube and see if he sounds if the closed captioning shows him making sense. Because if he comes off sounding crazy, you know, I'm gonna think, oh hey, they're deliberately making me sound crazy because of the way I believe or something like that. So it's an experiment here. Okay, here it goes.
There are caliphate clubs in London now and Berlin and elsewhere, quite important ones. And what I want to know is why that is and what we should think about it. Believers in this fantasy have, Laurie's spared me the need to say much of this, have committed extraordinary atrocities in Istanbul, in Madrid, in India, in the Philippines, in Indonesia, and of course in our own fair city. And the pretexts for it vary. They can be, the excuse for the mass murder can be that Australia has helped East Timor become independent from Indonesia.
I think I'll put it up here.
It can be that Newsweek has
and
printed
that
a
way,
false story about the
I'm going to put
desecration
it
of
up
a
at the top,
supposedly holy book. You never know what
and
it's going to be
then
next. But everyone knows to be careful about
see
it.
if it matches when it's
And
done in
everyone
mine.
understands that the threat of violence that backs it is believable. And that's my opening position. Now you will say, I can hear it already being said, you may be saying it already to yourselves because the defense mechanisms kick in. And in any case, Laurie already said it for you. And I hope Professor Ramadan won't feel the need to say it again, but if he does, fair enough. You may say, that's not the real Islam. Those aren't real Muslims. Now, isn't that a fascinating objection? Is there anyone in this room, I exempt Professor Ramadan because it's his turn to speak next, is there anyone in this room who would care to arbitrate that question? Who is to say, where is the authority that defines who is a true son of the prophet or true interpreter of his work? Part of the problem to begin with, and it's part of the problem because it is a religion, is that it's perfectly true to say we don't know who the true Muslims are. How right that is, who does speak for it. Only the second problem with defining Islam as peaceful, only the second problem with defining it as peaceful has to do with the fact that it's highly fissile and highly schismatic, that there is a civil war going on within it, the religion of peace. As we speak, at least one civil war between the votaries of this religion of peace is already taking place, and some of it is exported outside that world into ours, very salient fact. The first reason, though, is this. Islam makes very large claims for itself. Very large claims indeed. It claims to be the last and final religion. The last and final revelation. When you see bumper stickers, everyone says you can't reduce major things to a bumper
Yep,
sticker.
says
It's
Yukon.
not my idea to have bumper stickers saying Islam is the solution. It's a well-known slogan, actually, of parties associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. They say Islam is the solution for everything. It takes care of all your life and the one to come. Sexuality, political economy, banking, diet, relations with other religions, everything. It's a total solution. What is creepy about the word total? Hope I don't have to tell an audience like this. It's the first 5 letters of the word totalitarian. It's absolute. It's absolute. It's all-inclusive. It's unanswerable. And oddly, for a religion that makes such large claims, notice another thing about Islam, it doesn't particularly like having these claims questioned or scrutinized. In other words, just as there is with all religions, an inverse relationship between the claims they make and the evidence they can produce for them. You must have noticed that. With Islam, a younger religion, and perhaps therefore more in its first flush, there's an extraordinarily strong willingness to say that any challenge to its absolutist claims is by definition profane. And profanity and blasphemy can be the antecedent to very severe punishment, and often are, for Muslims and for non-Muslims. And this is not a road of peace, in my submission. Thus my first point completed. The claim to govern everything from hygiene to sex and the afterlife, which contains detailed prescriptions for the good and bad versions of itself, again strikes me as somewhat totalitarian, and they're both based upon 2 very, very questionable and not very peaceful concepts. One is the idea of a perfect human being, the Prophet Muhammad, and the other is the idea of a perfect book, the Qur'an, the recitation. Now, the category perfect human primate or mammal and the category flawless book that can possibly not use any kind of change, revision, or editing are categories that do not exist. There are no members of these categories. Therefore, any challenge to this faith is bound to lead to heresy and to schism, and does. And just as all forms of absolutism and totalitarianism, leader worship and revealed truth, unalterable text, always do, because they can break, perhaps, but they cannot bend. And thus the latent potential of violence between them, among them, as well as within them, is very great. And at any moment, someone is in danger of being accused of being an apostate or an unbeliever. This week, the Coptic Pope of Egypt, Pope Shenouda, who represents 10 million Egyptians, was hustled onto Egyptian TV. He's not asked on all that often. I don't think he was even asked on this time. I mean, he was told he'd better come on. Why is the leader of Egypt's huge Christian minority suddenly compelled to make a TV appearance? Because one of his bishops had said in an interview that he thought that some of the verses of the Qur'an showed signs of having been added later on and to have been later accretion. And Pope Shenouda was forced onto the television.
Okay, I've still got some time, so I'm going to now play the next Hitchens tape. Let's see here. Yeah. Okay.
Of any kind, mental or physical, since we're talking about the Greek concept of the body and of the spirit and of virtue. Just to get that out of the way. Now, you're right.
Closed captioned here.
I was surprised to find myself saying, Professor, when you say that the problem is not the book, but the reader. In the case of the Quran, that is certainly true of me. It's true probably of every book I've ever read, that there are difficulties I have with it or capacities I don't have with which to approach it or understand it. But if I'm reading the Quran, I certainly say, well, I can't tell whether this book is the word of God or not. I can only doubt that there is such thing. But I can hope that this was a bad day for God. Can't I? And I can hope to live in a country where I can say that and get applause. Yeah, yes, and even mirth. And don't think that it isn't a precious thing, and don't think it's being compromised. I'm coming to that. I don't like the idea of a paradise reward for martyrs. Don't like it. It's not me somehow. Don't like the account. Don't like the early accounts of village squabbles with the local Jews who've taken a look at the new claimant to be the Messiah and decided about him what they decided about the previous claimant. He's no good. He's not up to snuff. Do you think the Jews are ever going to be forgiven for that, by the way? For rejecting 2 in a row? I don't think so. And I don't see why they should hope for. I don't see why they should hope for forgiveness either. And still I'm allowed to stand here and say this. And there are many parts of Europe I couldn't do that anymore. Or I'd have to be very careful in who I'd invited for the audience. I couldn't do it easily on the air. Couldn't do it easily in print. Couldn't do it easily in public. Couldn't do it on certain campuses. Couldn't do it with certain publishing houses. Now, all of this has been done to us by the wrong Muslims. Well, let's get together then, isolate who these wrong Muslims are, who've imposed a culture of violence-backed censorship upon us, and let's get rid of them and have an honest discussion about the text and the reader. And I think the ball is in your court, Professor, on that. Just to stay with my own profession, the thing I know best. Not one major media outlet, print or broadcast, has yet shown you what the Danish cartoons actually look like. Yale University Press, which commissioned a book on them, which was to include the cartoons, as how could it not, eventually panicked. Yale University Press panicked and published the book without the cartoons over the objections of its author. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. The President of the United States and the head of the Joint Chiefs a few days ago were so pulverized with fear that they had to address personally in pleading tones a Christian nutbag in Florida who might have been or might not have been about to commit a minor act of blasphemy. Is this the culture that Islam wants us to have in relation to it? One of, if you like, preemptive submission, preemptive cowering, backed by the fear of force, because that is not multiculturalism. That's nothing like the gorgeous mosaic. That's actually the absolute negation of what a multicultural system would be like. And a multicultural system has to look rather askance, I think, on a religion whose preachers and websites openly make threats against people like myself, against the Jewish people, against the Hindus, who, for heaven's sake, aren't even monotheists, can be killed on almost any pretext, against, and a very important point, and I have to make it, and against the wrong kind of Muslim. Now, Professor, I'll say this as mildly as I can, you may not be aware that you were, and I'm saying I don't want to increase the area of unexpected offense taking that's been so hugely broadened by the sensitivities of a religion that has the answer to everything. But I'll just say I don't greatly care to be told, as if I didn't know, that an Iraqi life is as precious as an American one. And as someone who's visited Iraq quite a lot, I have occasion to think about it a good deal. I wonder if you could mention anything the United States has done in Iraq that is remotely as criminal, as sadistic and as violent as the blowing up of the Mosque of the Golden Dome in Samarra. One of the holiest sites in the Muslim world, callously blown up by Sunni forces in alliance with forces who, perhaps I'd agree with them for once on this, were fascistic Baathists. Probably they got the weapons and the high explosive from them. That makes it worse, surely. Intending to start and successfully, in fact, initiating a civil war in which countless thousands of people have been killed, religious processions have been just fired upon, funerals have been fired upon, Qur'ans
I've got to stop this,
of course,
and
been incinerated. Much more importantly, children, old people, and civilians.
I will
now,
add this
where
to
is,
the
I just wonder,
video I'm making on
you
closed
must be
captioning.
able to quote it to me.
Bye.